have one more. Yeah. You just need some stuff. Sometimes having enough storage on your property can be a bit daunting. Basically, you need a small garage to store everything that you have, or you need a shop for a certain amount of time. Just being able to have that in a budget anywhere, especially right now, might be a little bit beyond your reach. Well, I did find an alternative, and I'm hoping that it's going to work just as well. It's a 10 by 20 carport canopy, and we're hoping that that's going to be sturdy enough to be able to store some of the things that need to be out of the weather. This option may end up being a semi-permanent solution for you. So I say let's get started. The first rule of assembling anything from a kit is to pull everything out of the box, make sure everything's there, make sure everything's in good condition. Once the box is open, we're going to want it out of the way so we have plenty of room to be able to lay everything out to make sure everything's there and everything's good. And before you empty out too much, you really want to make sure that you can find the instruction manual easily enough so that way you can start taking inventory, and that's what we can start doing now. Try to put the pieces in an area where you know they'll end up going, or at least figure they might be going. That way you're not shuffling around everywhere trying to find the parts you need. These are pretty stable, pretty sturdy, it looks like. They're pretty close to the same gauge as you would find in a chain link fence post. Hopefully this puts it in a position to where if pieces ever need to be replaced, they can be replaced with standard posts that you would get at your nearest home improvement store. Nice little bag here. It serves a purpose, but it isn't one of those things that you usually see in a kit like this. Something that would make sense to have in a kit, but you usually don't see. Actually provide you workloads to do this with. We have wrenches, not significant wrenches, but the fact that they included them is kind of helps. Looks like we're good.
To get things moving along and get started on the first step, we decided to lay out all of our pieces that we're going to be assembling, and we've already started one section of the roof line to kind of give an idea of what we're going to be looking at.
I have to say, this is all pretty self-explanatory. You want your 1A towards the bottom of the roof line, and you want your number 1 towards the top of the roof line. And then you click these together, the little push buttons there. Then you take your 3-point piece, and you click that in, like that. And then you have another 3-point piece. Click that in with that button. Make sure it engages. There we go. And make sure that they're worked out to where you have the one going towards the body of the canopy, and you have one piece going down the leg, and you have one piece facing the roof, and that'll be your first half of it. Don't forget to put your clips in. If you do forget, it's not that big a deal because obviously it comes apart pretty easily. Then you take your number 2A, click that into place, your number 2, and then you've got your 4-way. Again, make sure that it's going to sit in this configuration. One side going down to the leg, one side going to the roof piece, and then two of the sections going in the opposite direction. And make sure you get your little pieces here and put them in, like I keep forgetting. And that gives us one side of the roof line, similar to what you see back there. Now, at this point, it's all going to start taking shape. Now we get to bring the roof line up. As you can see, it doesn't take much at all. Now we're going to take these two in that we've created roof lines with, and we're going to connect between the two. Here we are. Just a matter of finding that little push. It's a matter of finding the push clip for the hole. And then we connect them. Now we can actually find the whole scope and size of this thing. This is about where we want it. And it looks like it's going to give us plenty of room to move around it, even after it's completely assembled and being used. When you're doing the outside ridge, have the wing nut facing inside, just so it's not something that the canopy material ends up dragging across, possibly weakens it and thins it out, especially if it's windy. We're going to leave it loose for right now to make sure we've got the piece in and located where it needs to be along the ridge. And this will give the ridge some stability, which will then give the rest of the frame a bit more stability too. And this is when we use They're a super duper handy dandy wrench. Set the wrench on the bolt, tighten the wing nuts by hand. Then you just hold the wing nut in place while you tighten. You do that 4 more times, and then this step will be complete. Okay, now it's time to get half of the height. You'll end up using the top leg. That way we can bring this up a little bit and deal with the roof material. And the same for the other side. So I say we find the piece that we need, which is going to be the roof material. This thing's going to be big. We've laid it out on the inside of the canopy just so we could string it all out. What we're going to do now is we're going to get it onto one side or the other. And there's a certain way it's going to have to go in. All of the gussets need to be facing the inside. Also, at the corner here, this needs to be on the inside of the seam, and the top needs to be on the outside of the seam. So now we're going to take this in, and we're going to start walking it over. This is one of those parts where it's going to be a lot easier if you have a second person helping you, but it can still be done with one person. Just get this corner to the ridge of the roof. Keep working your way to the other side. And once you have that, then just pull it the rest of the way. These corner braces here go in the same way as the ridge braces go in. However, it said nothing about when to put this in, which is no big deal because you just lift the leg up a little bit and get it in there and you're fine. Now these go in exactly the same way as the ridge braces do, by getting one bolt in first, just by hand. Get it lined up as close as you can to a 45-degree angle. Start tightening by hand, and then finish up by tightening it with the tool until they're all nice and tight. These here are going to give you stability this way, where the ridge braces will give you stability this way. Before we get too far, we're going to want to put the short side walls, the front and the back walls on. Because once we get the legs in, we're not going to be able to reach all the way up here. Not without a ladder. And to place these, you want the seam on the inside. Now, to keep anything from rubbing, it might be best to put the ball in between the two pieces there. We just want to do this for the roof line for now. When we get this lifted up and then we get the other walls put in, we're going to connect both of the walls in the same manner at the corners. And as we go, this is going to tighten it up quite a bit. So it's all going to make its way to where it needs to be. But helping it stay that way as you go definitely can't hurt anything. Make sure that when you're connecting these, this is the first one you loop into, because you're going to have this material here as well. And it's going to allow this one to tuck in like that. But as you get more of these in, you're going to notice that it's starting to tighten it up. Once we get the sides in, it's definitely going to tighten everything up and keep things stable and secure a lot better that way. Another thing I'm liking about this kit is that it just takes these here. These are able to be commonly replaced. You would just have to go to your local hardware store or your nearest home improvement store and buy a pack of 100 or whatever. So these are easily replaceable. Looks like our next step is to get the bottom half of the legs in. Time to get these things in the air. Our last piece is the 3A. Now each one of these has these little markings here. We'll show you what those are for in just a little bit. The canopy is light enough to where you can keep repositioning it to give yourself enough room in the areas that you need to work, but make sure you're able to start with enough room to be able to do so. If the canopy is actually binding against anything, lifting one side up higher than the other, it's still a pretty good amount of weight, and having it bind on you will make it more difficult. And that's ultimately our height. With quite a bit of room, now we get to put the sidewalls on. And again, with these pieces, work everything to where it can be on the outside, and make sure all the sewed seams are on the inside. And just to make things easier, to be able to have enough of these bungees available to you, as they sort them through, put them around your wrist. That way you have them handy, because pockets aren't always big enough. Who doesn't like a good bangle around their wrist? We're going to go opposite sides and alternate. That should most definitely start tightening everything up. And then we finish off the side corners here. They're not going to look too pretty yet. These guys are our feet. And these are going to allow us to anchor to ground. So we take one nut, one bolt, make sure the hole's lined up, of course, and get them tight. And use both the wrenches to get them tight. As long as they don't move around too much, you'll be fine. And another feature of this is that it has Velcro straps along here to help tie the canopy material to the post, and it keeps it from moving around a bit also. Well, it's definitely starting to look like something. Let me show you this now. These holes here are obviously there for a reason, and that reason is there's a little hook right here, and it helps keep the canopy top from moving around too much, and it helps hide your corner seams. So we're going to do that on all four corners, and that will tighten the canopy top and make sure it doesn't move anywhere.
Although we are not using the anchoring locations on the feet of the posts, it is highly recommended that you do so, using the 3 anchor holes at the bottoms of each posts. The type of anchors you use can be at your discretion.
If you're anchoring in dirt, even though they're not significant anchors, the anchors provided, they will work sufficiently. If you're assembling this on a concrete slab, then you'll want to use the appropriate anchors and anchor bolts to hold it down, as well as using the outrigger anchors.
The canopy material obviously seems a bit loose for right now, but that's going to go away once we have the legs completely lined up and ready to anchor them in. This ties here to the frame, and there's a grommet hole. I don't know if you can see it. There's a grommet hole right there, right here, that the end of the rope will slip into. These anchors don't seem very significant, so I'm not sure how well they're going to do, but hopefully they do well. Threads right in. Hopefully it stays there. I would say these anchors aren't rated for 55-mile-an-hour winds, so I wouldn't expect them to be able to hold this canopy down in that type of weather. And you really just want to get it somewhat tight. You don't want to make it too tight. I'm just going to put a small loop, just enough for the rope to be able to pass through, just enough to keep it down in the wind. It's going to be the anchor itself that's going to be taking the brunt of everything and the weight of the canopy. Hopefully these anchors do well. You'll end up using the anchors when you have a clear space to do so. Now, if you have a structure nearby, you can always use a screw and some washers and then tie it down there. As long as the screw is at least 2 inches long, it's going to be sufficient enough grab in that screw to act as an anchor. And this can apply to a fence or a wall. Some people will just tap it in with a hammer to a certain point until the threads actually catch. Or you could drill a pilot hole with a drill bit. And the drill bit has to be smaller than the shaft itself, so that way there's enough wood for the threads to catch. Put your loop in, because you're going to be tying it off. Make sure you tie it off just like that, so it's easier to take it out if you need to, but it's going to stay secure organically. So you want to do that in any location where you have a structure that you can use as an anchor point for that rope. And that rope is there to stabilize the top of the canopy, as well as create downward force to the canopy to keep it from going anywhere in a windstorm.
After over a year, a few rains, and into the second season of wind and rainstorms, we've decided to check back with the garage canopy to see how it was holding up.
To be honest, seems like the only problem that the canopy is suffering is a bit of a rip at the zipper, but I think it's because of these guys right here, so not too bad. We've got a little bit of a tear at the top. Seems like something that may need to be taken care of. We lost the tether, so a more resilient rope may be in order. Same as over here, here, and here. Checking it out from the inside.
it looks pretty good after the last heavy rain we had, and seeing as how this is a temporary structure, and really this is just a place for stuff not to get wet or damaged, and it's doing quite excellent at that with very little water intrusion along the bottom. There's our spot along the ridge there that has a hole that we'll see about patching up. I don't know what we're going to be able to do about the zipper, but for the winds that we've had in the area and the rain that we've had in the area, this canopy has really held up. It actually holds quite a bit, as you can tell. So I'm quite satisfied with the follow-up here.
It sure does look a whole hell of a lot more gooder than the places I've been living in for the last year and a half.
Well, that settles it then.
So apparently, all we were waiting on was a seal of approval from Joseph.
Not exactly, but the fact that it was an assembly, we could do a product review for it.
Product review. Lucky Berry 10-foot by 20-foot heavy-duty carport canopy in grey.
This was a considerably easy kit to put together, even with only one person. The illustrations provided for much easier assembly than any storage shed that I've ever worked on. Included were extras like a decent parts bag, wrenches for the brace assemblies, and even a couple of pair of gloves to do the work, even though they were too small for me. The framing is comparable in size and thickness to standard galvanized posts, and the bungees are standard enough that if you need replacement parts, you'll be able to find them locally. And for the most part, it's been able to withstand a couple of 50-mile-an-hour windstorms so far. Unfortunately, it did seem to suffer a blowout at one of the peaks, which will need to be tended to. The anchor ropes should be substituted with sturdier rope, and the stitching at one of the zippers came apart, another location that will need attention. But for the most part, I think those things can be easily remedied. So it's not too bad, actually.
In my opinion, it's a pretty decent place to live. If you decide to put this up in your backyard, you might want to keep an extra empty bucket handy, because this thing don't have indoor plumbing. That's why I'm going to have to give it 4 out of 5 wrenches.
So it's not too bad for a semi-permanent structure. Not too bad for just a couple $100.